All righty. So welcome everybody to Newspeak House here and to this online presentation of AI plus accessibility. I am very honored to be the one giving this talk. It's the culmination of about 2 to 3 months of hard work on figuring out just really what we can do with some of the tools that identify as AI within an industry and the interest area that I am passionately involved in, which is the accessibility, web accessibility space. So I'm really excited to share some of my learning and some of the tools that I've been working with you all here, and also folks after the fact who will get a recording of this. So to begin, I just want to do a quick survey of both online and in person. So online, there's a little raise your hand button, and in person, if you don't mind raising your hand. But just so I can tune this presentation, how many people here in the space and online would consider themselves accessibility pros or accessibility experts? How many people here, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand online, if you consider yourself an accessibility expert? Great, I'll give another second for that. Great. And then you can put your hands down. Now, how many people would consider themselves AI pros or AI experts? One here. Okay, a few. Yeah, raise your hand digitally if you consider yourself an AI expert or AI pro. Great, a few there. You can put your hands down. Now, 2 more questions. How many of you would just say that you love AI? Just put your hand up, your digital hand up, or your in-person hand out. If you just love it, if you have some like warm feelings towards AI, oh great, we have a bunch of people online. Great. You can put your hands down, you lovers of AI. And then how many people would say they just hate AI? They have disdain for AI. Would you just raise your hand if you have just some kind of innate disdain for AI? Great. Okay, great. That's important. So you can lower your hand with the disdain for AI. That really helps me create the tone for this talk, and it's really nice. It looked like online we have a pretty mixed bag of folks who love AI, folks that are experts, and folks that aren't experts. So this talk will be pretty general. I'm not going to get into nitty-gritty details. We can do that during a Q&A. And speaking of the Q&A, if you want to drop any questions into the chat while I speak, I will get to them after. So please ask your questions in the chat, and I will get to them after. All right, now we begin. And if there's any issues, Grace will let us know in the corner here. So this presentation that I'm giving strives to be as accessible as possible. The video, as I said, is being recorded and will be captioned. We're not just going to have automated captions. We'll go through and make sure they're really nice. So anyone who is hearing impaired, we will caption the recorded video. I'll describe everything I show on the screen so visually impaired folks can follow along. Everything that I put as a slide will also be voiced out and then also captioned. So there will be nothing on the screen that I won't speak about. If you want to participate in this discussion and don't want to be recorded, say, I don't want to be recorded before, and I will edit you out post fact. I think we're going to do, because there is a lot of people online, I think we're just going to try to get as many kind of messages in the message system, and then I'll address them versus people coming on screen. But still, if you don't want your question recorded or your opinion recorded, feel free to jump in and say, I don't want to be recorded. And before we begin, are there any other accessibility concerns? Let me look quickly in the chat just to make sure there's no other accessibility concerns. Feel free to chat. You can also email me, blake@decubing.com, if you're watching this in the recorded state. I'll just give it one more second just to make sure there's no other accessibility concerns that we should address right now. And you can, again, email me, blake@decubing.com. So let's get started. I am Blake Bertuccelli-Booth, and what I'm showing now is a picture of me. And on the right side of the page, I'm also showing some alt text that has been described by different AI tools. to kind of give you a picture of what AI can do. And what I hear most people are excited about. AI tools describing images. Finally, alt text is solved. Woohoo! So I have a picture of myself, alttext.ai describes me as a man wearing glasses and a red hat. That's it. Okay, so I'm a man. I'm Blake Bertuccelli-Booth, a man wearing glasses and a red hat. That's how I will identify. That's what I show my picture. That's what everyone who is cited sees and understands from this image. Maybe, maybe not. Another AI alt text service, astica.org, describes me as a young man with a bright smile, stands in front of a building wearing a red baseball cap and glasses. His face is framed by the brim of his hat, which casts a shadow over his eyes. He wears an open-collared shirt that reveals the top of his chest and neck. The glasses he wears are black-rimmed and have lenses that reflect the sunlight around him. His expression is relaxed, yet alert. This is all from astica.org. As if he's ready to take on whatever comes next. Maybe the next slide. He looks confident and contented in this moment, standing tall against the backdrop of the cityscape behind him. The age given, which Astica does, is 29. So these two demonstrations I have are alt text. And what a lot of people use alt text for is when a screen reader comes to an image, to describe that image. So this kind of text within the billings of these different products is supposed to describe an image that you come to on a page. Now, you all who are looking might see some issues with this. I'm gonna cover some general issues. So there's a few key general issues. The first one that I wanna note, because this is something that's been coming up a lot in accessibility communities, is there's no race or identity description. And the comment that I've heard from screen reader users is race and identity is a hot topic. Shouldn't I have the opportunity to engage in that conversation too? So I hear people who use screen readers and maybe have their own kind of identification or want to be part of a conversation, but they come to a web page with I've seen a diversity meetup with a lot of different pictures on it and alt text describing the different people in the photos as having hats and glasses, but it doesn't actually speak to their to the information that sighted people would find in the image. So that's a little bit of an issue. The second big issue that we see with AI description is no context. And some tools even try to do context, but they're not that great. It is important that alt text speaks to the context that it is given on a page. So for instance, if I go to a teen page, if you saw my image on a teen page, you might want to know as a user who uses a screen reader that there's just a bunch of headshots on the page. So that's information that maybe you want to skip over. And as an accessibility professional, I know that headshots should say headshot in it, because that helps understand what the context of the image given. Alt text doesn't necessarily do that. There are tools that are trying and moving there, but any existing product that tells you we will solve your alt text problems with our AI has really big problems and probably creates more problems than it solves. For instance, the headshot thing, if there's a lot of descriptions of a lot of different images on a page, it would probably be better and more appreciated by screen reader users just to not have any descriptions than a bunch of AI descriptions that are very generic and don't give any information. Alt text is supposed to give information. That is one of the big things. It's supposed to describe images. One of the other pieces that I've seen is false information. So I think that the last slide I had on alt text generator said I was 29. I'm 34. And I don't even know if that's information that would need to be in alt text. But false information is something I've seen a lot in alt text. It might even, some of the AI alt text providers do provide race. And because of some of the biases in the AI, they aren't providing the right race for people. They're not providing the right gender identifications for people. There are so many issues around these kind of AI alt text descriptions, yet they're billed and sold to people now as the cure-all. Yes, they might fill in the alt text tag, but again, they're not going to solve the problems. So this is just one example of how alt text and AI just kind of don't work together. And like, if I was to write my own alt text, if I was to describe myself, it would be something that I don't even know how an AI could come up with. Because right now I'm showing my image, the same image I was showing before with the generated alt text, which is me in a red hat, which is the hat I'm wearing right now, with brown glasses, not black glasses, smiling, and probably looking forward to the future, which that's probably right. But like the way that I would describe or define myself is first and foremost a techno-optimist. I do think technology is going to make our life better. As you'll see, I'm a real big optimist. I'm not a big person for just constant harsh critique. I look forward to the future, and I am ready to iterate constantly on the idea that there is a better future with technology. I also created something called Equalify. So Equalify is a total open source web platform. It's free and open source. It has a AGPL license, if that means anything to you. And you could go on github.com/BBERTUCC/Equalify or look for Equalify on Google, and you'll find it. You can download it. You can use it. I spent about a year of my life just focused on building this and giving it away to people. So I created Equalify, and that's kind of how I've been publicly known in the accessibility circles as the creator of this thing called Equalify. I'm also owner of Decubing. This is a newer thing. I realized that we need to make money in accessibility circles. So I've taken on this company that I actually had a relationship with before, but after my year of developing Equalify, I said, oh no, we need more sustainability in accessibility. So I own Decubing, and my hat itself is red, and it says Decubing, DECUBING on it. I'll talk a little bit more about that in future slides. And yes, I'm wearing a hat with white letters. AI got that right. So really, the way that if you asked AI to identify me from this picture, the only thing it really got right in my book was I'm wearing a red hat with white letters. So it's important for me to also frame what AI is, because, or how I'm understanding it in this presentation. With AI, I'm focusing on tools that identify as AI, because like years ago, I was actually working on some machine learning projects, and we decided to completely scrap the interest in AI, and we thought AI as a word was going to just die the death of another buzzword. And then all this new ChatGPT stuff kind of has launched AI into a whole nother level of fiction attached to branding. But we are going to talk about AI as we know it. Tools like ChatGPT, tools like Stable Diffusion, we'll talk about those. We're going to use a generalist term of AI. We're focusing on tools that identify as AI. Even Siri identifies as AI. So we'll just talk about, we're not going too technical in our understanding of AI. When we talk about accessibility, we're focusing on web content accessibility. There's lots of different types of accessibility. There's wheelchair access to buildings. There's different things around internet speeds. We're talking about just web content accessibility, making sure people with disabilities have the resources to access information. That's what we're focusing on with accessibility, web accessibility. That's my specialty, and that's what we'll focus on through this process. I understand that there's a lot of other applications for AI beyond web accessibility, but for this presentation, we're just talking about web accessibility. So just a scope of the problem, and this is an amazingly tractable, neglected problem. This is when I was working in web design and I started to learn about web accessibility, it hit me. I was also doing a lot of research on effective altruism. And a lot of the heuristics that we use to figure out the most important neglected social issue to solve, I was applying to the different things I did in the web world. And when it came to accessibility, I was floored. 1.3 billion people experience significant disability. Now, I would push that it's a lot higher than that, because we're all going to get old. We will have injuries, there's disease. There's the difference between, we can have temporary disability. My wife recently hurt her shoulder, so she was using voice assistant more. There's a lot of need for these tools because almost everyone will be affected by it. As we get older, our eyes degenerate, our eyesight degenerates. There is so much need. And it's really like not being really looked at. Still today, one of the best statistics that I have is 96.3% of homepages, and this is the million most popular homepages, fail web compliance testing. 96.3%. That's huge. So if you think about, there's 1.3 billion people who experience disabilities, and 96.3% of the World Wide Web, or of the million most popular pages, fails compliance testing. That is an amazingly neglected problem. That is a problem that, like, why, like, if 96.3% of the million most popular homepages had an error message or a security issue, people would be on that like rats on cheese or whatever. And it's just, I'm not seeing that level of interest in accessibility. People are very passionate about it, but there's not that level of interest from a wider group. And in fact, there's a lot of disdain around accessibility because of these rules. So what I'm showing on the screen is number 78, and under it says WCAG 2.1 standards. 78 is like a big number I can put on the screen, so it's kind of around that. But like, if you think about accessibility, accessibility is defined by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which the W3C group defines themselves. And in these standards, this is how you can tell if a website is accessible or not, and how you can follow, the best way to make your website accessible. This is not the end all be all, but it gives you a good picture. The fact that there's really only 78 shows how neglected this is, because if you think about the range of disabilities, the amazing spectrum of autism, there's so much complications, and yet we only have 78 standards. It's like to say, if you're a medical professional diagnosing an issue that a user, that a person is having, or your patient is having, you only have 78 guidelines to follow to diagnose every problem, and that's an issue. We need there. I think it's an issue for several reasons. A lot of it is the gatekeeping around policy, but then there's also just like the interest that people have is not to that level of, oh no, we need to fix this now. Like when Google saw ChatGPT and it was like, oh no, we need to put a lot of resources to it. There is a fire happening right now. There's 1.3 billion people, and there 96.3% of homepages fail compliance testing. I'm going to go over and then I'll come back for questions. That's cool. So what is accessibility? The basic overview, again, I put up those standards. They're guidelines to the WCAG standards, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, are guidelines to make content more accessible. So they're what a governing body has decided and said, this is some guidelines that we can say, if you follow these, your site can be called accessible. It's focused on people with disabilities. So there's a lot of different types of access issues. So like internet speed is another one. People living in poverty have many, many issues. But the WCAG is focused on people with disabilities. It's written by working groups of users, advocates, policymakers, corporate shills, people who have vested interests and monetary interests in defining guidelines or keeping guidelines out. So it's written by a wide variety of people. It includes both web pages and apps, and even moving into VR devices and things like that. Standards are always changing. Like I said, the 3.0 will probably include VR, AR standards as well. And it's defined by both qualitative and quantitative success criteria. So this is something that I'll touch on in a little bit. But it's really important to know that, like, if somebody has a one-click fix for all your accessibility errors, it's probably wrong, because a lot of accessibility is defined qualitatively. It's not defined quantitatively. You can't really write a script, no matter how smart it is, to solve all the issues. And you can make workflows better, but it's really important to stress that, like, the WCAG is not a list of rules that you just have to pass and fail. It's a larger, more living guidelines that do have very subjective kind of analysis criteria. The WCAG helps screen reader users. So if you're, and part of this presentation is for people who are creating AI themselves, and this is really important to know. So you have to be aware that like screen reader users will be using your devices. How do you work for them? You know, if you're building a PDF that has a lot of cool effects in it, how is a screen reader user going to access that information? It's for users with low vision. There's standards around text size and color contrast. The WCAG is for users on the autistic spectrum. There's context helpers and language suggestions. A lot to do with simplifying the way information appears on a page. WCAG is for users with physical and motor disabilities. Guides on input sizes and keyboard navigation. Very important. Everything should be navigated by a keyboard because not everybody can use a mouse. That's a key kind of takeaway. WCAG is defined by users who are deaf or hard of hearing. Closed captioning guidelines. There's a lot of different helping and like suggesting how we can make audio communicate to people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Users with dyslexia rely on WCAG to provide guidelines on simplifying communication for legibility. One of the cool things that's happening with WCAG right now is there's a move towards simple language, which is really good because like I identify as having dyslexia, and words start jumbling on a page if there's too much. And so that's really important for me. Users with epilepsy are affected by WCAG. There's thresholds on flashing. You can literally say, this is flashing too much, and it's in a range that could cause problems with people with epilepsy. So WCAG is really important for these types of users, and it's really important for you if you're designing any communication asset to keep in mind these type of users. UK.gov has a really great tool set of infographics, and if you just Google gov.uk accessibility do's and don'ts, you can quickly see just a baseline of what you should and shouldn't do that most people won't follow, which is kind of silly because it's very simple. It's not major pieces, and it doesn't require whole rethinks of UX. So in putting this presentation together over the last few months, I've been talking with a lot of experts and also users, and I kind of wanted to distill 3 key accessibility problems around AI. And so users and people that I've talked to reported the number 3, and I'll go down from 3 to 1, which is 3 the least important out of 3, which is still important, and 1 the most important. So number 3, which I have on screen right now, is vision and text biases go unaddressed. So again, this quote, I want to be in a conversation on diversity even though I can't see. I heard this the other week, and like it struck me like a train, because it was like, why are people we were in a workshop around diversity, and the tools and the materials that were being shown on screen did not have descriptions on who was in the photos. It was kind of assumed that everybody would know. And so we need to help educate folks writing alt text that they need to speak to this concern. I want to be in a conversation on diversity, even though I can't see. So the number 2 AI accessibility problem, bad image descriptions. So this is a epidemic that's happening right now. The tools that I showed you and some bigger tools are incorporating an automatic alt text. This is a huge problem. I can't tell you how big the problem is. And I guarantee you news articles are going to be written about this, because I'm seeing it in forums of visually impaired people and people who use screen readers already, that websites are taking over this description, or they're handing over description to AI, which is creating a lot of misinformation out there. And it's happening right now in a lot of the companies are growing and growing and growing who are doing this alt text work, and it's a problem. It's a very big problem. But the number 1 problem, and I kind of burdened to crunch all my numbers of all the suggestions I got when I got this suggestion. So the number one problem that people report around AI accessibility is over-promising and under-delivering. So companies are using AI for tools that AI shouldn't be used for, or releasing on aspirational promises. This is a huge problem with almost every accessibility company today, because they see AI and AI translates into dollar signs. And they're releasing companies are releasing tools now as production tools that you should use, which is doing all the things that we just talked about, text biases. But even beyond that, they're taking away a lot of resources from work that is striving towards solutions and putting them into experimental research that is actually even angling at far-reaching possibilities that satisfy investors way more than users. So the number one, and I hear this, heard this again and again and again, and it was stressed over and over, the number one problem with AI accessibility is over-promising and under-delivering. So just to kind of dive into that a little bit, AI solutions seem good and are easy to sell. There are so many accessibility.ai. There's like, if you look at all the .ai top-level domains, there's a lot of accessibility, because accessibility experts think they can solve this issue, the issues with automation. And they see those numbers that I showed you before and say, oh, that's perfect for automation. And accessibility is automation. And most of the folks are good-intentioned, business-minded people. But it creates big problems. These solutions, as I was showing, harm accessibility. The solution, and this is again, my first question to people was, what is the biggest problem in AI accessibility? My second big question was, what do we do? How do we solve that problem? And this was also when my heart sunk a little bit, because I'm not a natural salesperson or business person, but literally everybody told me they need more investment in advocacy, and particularly investment in good tech, in tech that is furthering us towards accessibility solutions, because that tech exists. It is well underinvested in. There are some of the top accessibility experts have to fight foot and mouth for jobs that really take their attention away from where it should be, which is in good R&D. And so just the ideas of where the good AI work should be. So first and foremost, every product that does something that actually harms or have a high potential to harm a website accessibility should be labeled experimental. This should almost be mandated, because people are using and being sold products as solutions. They're not being sold as experiments. And OpenAI, for all of its credit, has kind of worked in a culture of experimentation into its releasing of products. Google has done this as well, and it's beautiful. It's just not being done in the accessibility space. In the accessibility space, a product is labeled your solution. It's not labeled an experiment. So the first and foremost thing is just label them experiments. Just say this is an experimental thing. People can pay to try the experiment. That's great. But things should be labeled experimental. There's not a lot of that being done. Second way that we can, second piece of good accessibility work is opt-out tools. So a lot of times you'll see accessibility problems start when you have mandated tools that will change the source code and nobody has control over it. So a screen reader will get to a page and all of a sudden they can't understand anything that's going on there. And it's not even because the site was originally coded that way. It's because the accessibility software that was installed just jumbles up everything. There's a really easy solution. It's fine to have bad accessibility software as long as you have a way for people to opt out. If the alt text is generated by AI, why not just have a button that says, don't show the AI generated alt text? That is another really, really important thing and will define a good accessibility tool. The third kind of work that we need to focus on is investing in accessibility research and education. This is the number one problem accessibility pros speak about. This is like how they see to solve solutions. I was just talking with let's see, where did I put it? I literally just dropped in a, oh, it's not there. I was just literally talking with a, I was just talking with an accessibility expert who runs WordPress accessibility. Like he literally runs the testing team that does WordPress, and WordPress is 40% plus of the internet. WordPress, for who don't know it, is a content management system that users maintain their website content through. And over 40% of the internet is run on WordPress. This gentleman, Joe, runs the WordPress accessibility channel, and he donates about 12 hours of his week every week to helping solve accessibility issues. He, said through his voice, which I put on screen, he said, like, the number one accessibility issue that I face is just a lack of funding. And this is why I've kind of made it my personal mission. This is how I think I'm going to make the biggest impact with accessibility, to develop systems that raise financing and investment for accessibility. So I'm really, really focused on investing in good accessibility and growing an accessibility marketplace. And so, the three or four reasons to invest in accessibility right now is accessibility is highly tractable and neglected. Highly tractable and neglected investments are usually good investments. When you have something that you could say, a lot of people are having a problem, a lot of people are clamoring for, but there's not a lot of solutions. Sounds like a pretty good investment. There are only a few organizations and individuals working on cutting edge tech for this very big problem. I've spoken with, I think, everybody who's working on some of these issues, and if someone who is working on an issue that and I haven't spoken to them, please get in touch with me. And it's pretty amazing how small the circle is of people who are working on solutions with accessibility. Another reason why investing in AI accessibility is important is because the investment grows a marketplace. Larger marketplaces of good actors creates new solutions. And so there is a marketplace of accessibility right now. A lot of accessibility contracts are pretty big, in the $40,000 to $100,000 a year range, even a lot higher when you're dealing with governments. And the marketplace is really small right now for that. And there's not a lot of folks who are just clamoring to get into the marketplace because this issue is neglected. And the more actors that get involved, the more they will do to promote solutions. And the more solutions are promoted, the more users are aware. And so creating a marketplace is really, really important in developing investment for accessibility. The fourth reason that I'm focused on investing in good accessibility is AI solutions can be affordable and impactful. This is a problem right now. One of the biggest, or what I hear from website owners when I ask them, why isn't your website accessible? They say, well, the tools to make it accessible cost a lot of money, the testing tools. And, a lot of these site owners, the real issue starts to creep up when you have hundreds, if not thousands, of pages. And then they go to a company to ask to contract with them to scan and help remediate it. And the cost for the scanning remediate is astronomical. I got involved and started to build in the open source way because a university came to me and told me what one of the contracts they were paying was. And I said, I can literally deliver the same solution with 3 or 4 weeks of coding. Let me do that, and you have it for free. Just take it. And so, furthermore, if we look at these problems at scale, if we say 96% of the internet, or 96% of the million most popular pages have accessibility issues, we are going to have a lot of users to serve. And when you have more users to serve, you can lower the cost burden. So I really think more investment in accessibility is investment in services that provide accessibility at scale. That can be done, and we can reduce the burden so that people who use ChatGPT once or twice a day are paying $20 a month, whereas big giant companies are paying lots more who use the service all the time. You can provide the same kind of model to accessibility. where users who are going to use it once or twice for the website are paying a very nominal fee for the same exact features that a big company would use, just not at scale. So I hope all of these 3 points really prove that money and new companies can make a difference. I'm very, very focused on building investment for accessibility, because I think that I know that it will make a difference. It will make the web more accessible if there is more investment in good products. So speaking of that, since I have a product, I want to show you a quick demo of a new product that I've been putting together. It's a experiment, very keyword experiment right now. I'm calling it AliGPT. And my company Decubing has been experimenting with this. And basically what we're trying to do is see what a large language model can do to help us understand if source code is inaccessible or accessible. So there's a big problem right now that you can only kind of either manually test a website to see if it's WCAG compliant, or you can use an automated test. The automated tests are less than perfect. Manual tests are very time intensive. So LLMs, what they do with these large language models, what they do is they will be able to look at source code and say, oh, yeah, I understand this. And then you ask it a question and say, like, well, does it have alt text? And it can look at the source code and say, yep, there's alt text. And it can tell you all sorts of other things. And the same way, if anybody has used ChatGPT to code a website, can reverse engineer it to understand the code of a website. And so what we're hoping to do is release what I'm about to show you as a service. So somebody like the ChatGPT API service, somebody would pay a nominal fee, a few pennies or a penny or two, and they would be able to get a full report of their system through this AliGPT. We're particularly focused on working with accessibility professionals who understand the limits of any kind of automated reporting. That's what we're very much focused on. So everything will look JSON-y and very kind of like technical, but it's only because we want to work with people who are not the end user client with a few pages, because I don't think it will serve them. So let me try this demo. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let's see. I'll just quickly share my entire screen. See if this works. All right. So what I'm going to show you right now is a service that I built, and we'll be releasing the service on decubing.com as an experiment, and we're releasing it in blog post starting maybe tomorrow or Friday. And we're going to be posting it here on Decubing. If you want to follow us, there's a newsletter button. And we're going to be releasing some of the results of this experiment. We're not going to be releasing it as something you can use today, but we're going to release it as an experiment. And so what AliGPT is a service that you would be able to get an API token from, just like a ChatGPT API. And for those of you who don't know that an API is just a way to get information from a web service. So we have this API token here. You can set a budget just like you would if you're dealing with any kind of API. And so we use this token. And then what I'm showing on screen right now is a terminal window. And I'm going to query AliGPT like a user would. So I just put in this pretty long query string, but a user maybe developing a report for their client or to scanning big system would put in some code to then query a URL. And this particular URL that I'm querying is a URL that has a test that sees if a scanner will recognize the 1.1.1 guideline being passed. So if this scanner recognizing that, then the scanner works. We created a bunch of different tests. I won't bore you with them all, but we have a bunch for all the different guidelines that we've published on our GitHub. So what I'm doing is I'm going to run this scanner, which uses the OpenAI API and some prompts I've built and some scrapers I've built to return a report of this page that is supposed to pass the 1.1.1 standard, which is around alt text. So I run it, and I will talk about things because it is GPT-4 is a little bit slow in responding, and it's doing a lot of stuff in the background. So right now it's looking at a whole bunch of stuff. And look, it returned, what I'm showing on the screen right now is JSON. It's really technical, but I'll highlight it. So it returned JSON, and it says passed, 1.1.1, it passed. And the reason why, it gave a reason. So something cool that we've done is we've helped prompt GPT to be opinionated and tell us the reason. Because this reason, hopefully, we could say that's totally wrong or that's totally right, but we start to understand why and how the thing is reasoning. I'll do another one with a fail just to see if it works, and and we'll see. And eventually this will be on a web service that will run really, really fast. Right now it's just serving off of my local machine, so it's taking quite a bit of time. But we're building a whole like Rust-based web service so that people can do this at huge scales and it can go pretty quick. So here we go. I did another one. Oh, it failed. So it's showing the different failures. There was a little bit of a hallucination with an A here. It decided to throw in. I don't know why I did that. But it is, I ran this scan against the fail web page, and it responded with a fail. So it's pretty cool. What we're doing is we're going to be releasing our tests 11 at a time. So we'll start with the first 11 standards, and we're going to be releasing these tests, these findings, making the tests open for anybody to use, and then eventually working to a place that hopefully we can use this experimental, keyword experimental scan for larger systems and start making money around this. Because I think that the real goal behind what we're doing is to make this kind of testing that I showed you very, 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 very inexpensive for a majority of people. But even though it's very, very, very inexpensive, it's being used at scale. So the fees from us being paid to do this are going to be paying for our development of our open source application. So Equalify.app will be completely free, and anybody can download it just like they download WordPress or any of their favorite open source tools. The development of this will be paid for by this, which I'm showing, which is our service. This is kind of the vision, the goal, and within this business model, we are able to deliver the cheapest possible testing that is amazingly useful, and also deliver it at scale to the clients that need it. So this is part of what Decubing is doing. It's a little preview. If you want to keep following, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter, which I'm showing on the screen right now, decubing.com. At the bottom of the page, there's a email update. In the next week, I'll be releasing some of the tests and experiments on decubing.com. So back to the presentation. We're almost over here. I know we're going into a bit of time. Let's see, here it is. 1 second, sorry, I'm just switching on the presentation. Okay, slideshow, all right. Oops, 1 second, my apologies. There it is, okay. So back to the presentation. I'm very excited to share that demo with everybody and anybody. You can get in touch with me. I think if you've subscribed through Luma, you have an email, and I'll send a follow-up email after the call. So just to kind of understand what Decubing is doing, we're actively fundraising, and like this week is the start of our fundraising. We're a mission-driven company trying to make the world more accessible. Our key metric, we have a double bottom line. Our key metric is the qualified pages per user. This basically means pages past accessibility scan. EPUs is what we're calling it, and that's right there with revenue. And we only want investors that understand that idea of a double bottom line business, because this idea of creating accessibility is why I'm in this game. I could go make money, as a software engineer if I cared about money, but I care about making websites accessible. Decubing is delivering accessibility service at scale. Again, like I showed you, we're hoping to partner with Google, partner with the GDS, partner with all sorts of folks to provide really low cost per use services that they can use and build reports around. We're like an Amazon AWS for accessibility. Accessibility as a service is what we're doing. We're focused on research around AI. Again, I said research is the key word. We want to be a research organization, not necessarily just like product, but focus on research and working and hiring some of the top accessibility professionals and allowing them to really figure out where the best solutions are and best use of time are, and giving them living wages. That's a huge thing. It's just something that is not there quite yet. So Decubing is focused on research, and we're fundraising to hire accessibility professionals who understand the landscape. The business supports both experts and users. The business model, as we've created it and as I've been publicly talking, it only works if our technology works. And we think our technology only works if we work with experts, because they know the limitations, and we're not going to do anything that really violates those limitations. And so we're building a business that supports both the experts and the users. We want to rely on the scale delivery so that we can make as many web pages accessible as possible. With 96% of the internet, we need to do a lot of work at scale. It can't just be one little website here and there. It has to be giant ecosystems. The US government, the UK government, we need to work at that level if we're going to make a real dent in accessibility. So the three ways you all can help here. One is invest in Decubing, and I'll put on my salesman voice and my salesman hat to say that, even though it doesn't come naturally. We need a better accessibility business to grow an accessibility marketplace. If you're interested in investing, we're really focused on people that are passionate about accessibility or that have companies that accessibility can help. Feel free to get in touch with me, blake@decubing.com, or I'm sure you can find me anywhere. But we're actively investing right now, and we're trying to do an investment push by October. If you're not interested in investing, or if you just want to help, you can definitely be an advocate. Speak up. People with accessibility issues can't always see what they're missing. It's a really important thing. And I was talking with somebody from the Office for Civil Rights, which does a lot of the legal compliance in the US. And they said, well, like, a reason why the alarm bells weren't ringing is because a lot of people who use screen readers didn't know what they're missing. And so you should be an advocate. The third kind of way you can help is join accessibility groups. So the one I love is the A11Y Slack, great one to join. The WCAG has working groups and conferences such as Access U. Just go to them, just see what's out there. Be a participant in these discussions. This is a real big way you can help. So you can invest in Decubing, be an advocate, or join accessibility groups. Those are three ways you can help. I want to thank you all for coming. You're free to go, but we're gonna take a 5-minute break. And well, let's make it a 2-minute break since we kind of went over. So we'll take a 2-minute break, and at 3 minutes past the hour, I'll answer some questions and we'll kind of digest the thing. So feel free to send a Google Meet, and I'll also voice some of the questions of the folks here. So please add your questions to Google Meet. We're going to start a Q&A in about 2 minutes. 3 minutes past the hour, we'll start a Q&A. I'm just going to quickly look through all the questions. So 2 minutes past the hour, we'll start a Q&A. I know there was a lot. Thank you. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask in here. And if there's no questions, we won't. So great. See a few questions entering into the space. Cool. And I'm actually just going to start answering some of the questions just because I don't see as many as I would have expected. Please ask anything. And you can also feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat too. Oh, my email's already in the chat. Great. So the first question is from Tony Dunn. Tony Dunn said you touched on the LLM giving a contextual analysis in the past test. How do you see that progressing over and above static analysis of HTML, i.e. we can see that there is no alt text tag in the code. So what does the AI bring to that? So the alt text example that I showed you is definitely a base level understanding. It's really good for analyzing large networks of sites. So if you have thousands and thousands of pages, that alt text analysis might be useful, but we don't really need GPT for that. Some of the stuff that I hope to get into a little bit later is the qualitative assessment and using GPT-4 for the qualitative assessment. I also want to say another benefit is that the tests, the automated scanning tests, are pretty resource intensive. So if you're using something like, there's a tool called Selenium, another one called Puppeteer, to run a test like Axe or Wave, which are all good tests, that is going to take resources, and we can get some of the large language model tests to be less resources. So if you don't need to rely on Selenium or Puppeteer, and you could rely on a large language model instead that is very much tuned for this, you might be able to decrease the resources, also decrease the cost, decrease the barrier for entry. But I will be releasing some of the more qualitative tests that are not just alt text at decubing.com pretty soon. It's just, I'm going 11 WCAG standards at a time. So eventually we'll get to those juicy ones that that automated scanning can't work. Another question from Dylan. What are the limitations that you are encountering with your work? Have you found ways to mitigate these limitations? Definitely fundraising is the biggest limitation. I am talking to as many funders and trying to do it as responsibly as possible. I'm also talking with as many possible clients as possible. There's a real chicken and egg issue that I'm running into. A lot of the bigger organizations that could help pay for some of the development work, they want me to be part of a bigger organization myself before they hire us or pay us money. And so we're having a lot of hard time getting over that burden. For instance, there's a ton of higher ed institutions that their directors of accessibility have said, we love what you're doing. We love Equalify. We love everything about it. We want to pay you to support our Equalify instance. But to get that contract, we need to have a certain workforce, a certain guaranteed amount of guaranteed service level. We need to pass different things called VPATs. We need to hire lawyers. And I've been bootstrapping and self-funding this, and I just don't have the funds to do the things to get the contracts that we need. So that's been the biggest issue. Okay. And Dylan said, oh, technical limitations. Yes, sorry, Dylan. So the biggest technical limitation that we've found so far is just the sheer volume of characters in source code and the size of sites that we scan. So I was telling folks here at Newspeak about scanning a web page with almost 10 megabytes of code in it. And passing that code to a large language model is a burden, and it's really difficult. And so that is the biggest technical limitation that we know about it. Luckily, it's a known issue, so I think that we can solve it, and just the way that we parse it and put it through. So definitely the size of web pages through LLMs is really important. And then I'm going to go up to Noah's question. Noah is sitting in our audience. Thanks for the talk and the scope analysis. You mentioned 1.3 billion people have disabilities. Are these disabilities that affect their ability to use the web? How many people use screen readers? Great question. I have been trying to track down good data on how many people use screen readers for a very long time. And it's hard to come by. It's oddly hard to come by. Somebody should do an audit or report on it, because I don't think it could be hard to find. It's just I haven't seen anything published. Regarding the idea of the 1.3 billion people who have disabilities, that number comes from the WHO from a report that is specifically talking about assistive technologies. So I can only assume that they've limited it to people that would be covered by different assistive technologies. That's an assumption. It might be less. I know in the US, there's some like percentages passed around, like 13% of the population would be able to utilize some of the technologies and guidelines that WCAG talks about. But again, I don't have great data on that. The WHO, if you type in 1.3 billion WHO disabilities, you could see the report and like vet the data and just kind of like, well, I guess there could be issues here, but there's lots of disabilities where it wouldn't affect your use of the internet for sure. You mentioned the phrase tuning regarding the LLM. So will you be moving to a tuned version of ChatGPT or another LLM? Yes, definitely 100%. I think that there is I've been experimenting with like this Hugging Face LLM and training my own, and we can do it. Yeah, I think that maybe we won't need to rely on something like ChatGPT or Bard and just tune an LLM for accessibility issues. Again, that's just, I'm only one person. I think we have 7 contributors altogether who most of them are donating their time, and I pay the other experts that just can't donate their time. So there's just limited resources right now to investigate this, but in theory, I could see an LLM being tuned directly to meet this particular problem of WCAG compliance testing. Theo, did you go beyond WCAG 1.1 criteria? What did GP4 struggle on? What was it really good at? So the reason why I don't want to necessarily do a preview of all of our tests with the entire WCAG is because some of the data isn't good enough. I could tell you like, oh, well, it struggled with context descriptions or finding transcriptions. But like, I can't really tell you that because we haven't done like double-blind studies and things like that. With the first 11 standards, it did pretty well. I have to say, like the first 11 standards in WCAG did pretty well. I did test, so I was testing WCAG 2.1, and I have begun to test the latest 3.0 WCAG 3.0 drafts, some of the standards in there, just because I think that when I can remove an experimental label from this, 3.0 will probably be close to a thing. And it's interesting. It needs to start working with, like these scans need to start working with source code around VR and like new standards that are being released every day. And there's limitations because the models are trained on source code and data of stuff that was released, several months ago, if not years ago. But I can see it being developed. And I am going to release over the next few weeks, months, I will be released really intensive studies and research that I'm just running constantly these hundreds of times against different types of websites, different types of source code, and reporting on that. And when we have that there, I will be able to form a better opinion on just like the total WCAG. Theo, how many people use? Oh, he has a good thing right there. Great. I was curious, says Dylan, if AI bias has shown up in your analysis. If so, what's the bias you've seen? So, for example, we're seeing issues around just how it recognizes faces, different races, different temperaments, different facial appearance, different signals and signs, different image symbols trained on different cultures. A lot around image recognition, we're seeing some of the bias. I haven't really experimented or heard a lot around Midjourney creating realistic images of people in wheelchairs or any assistive devices, but that's super cool, and I'm going to definitely take a note and look into that a little bit more. That's an awesome thing. I haven't really looked at it. Last question that I see here, and I can keep going on, is would you be willing to show some of the prompts you're using in AllyGPT? I haven't done accessibility code analysis. So I am one of the most open human beings in the world. I've shared my my password. My wife's in the audience, so I'm holding back sharing my password right now to a group of total strangers. One thing that a lot of people have advised me on, especially even people like one of my good friends is helped create the AGPL license, which is one of the most open source licenses. They advised me not to share my prompts yet. Not only my prompts, but some of the source code behind this material, because this is the profit generation hub for the open source tool. I also don't think it's going to, the other reason why I'm not going to share my prompts, at least right now, and the source code for this tool right this second, is because I think it's going to be of more, it's going to create more problems than it does good. I think that folks will take it and create, I know because I've been approached when I've shown this, folks will take this and create products using it, and it's an experimental state, but they will create products nonetheless. And I just can't be the source of that. So I can show you cool ideas and people can try to replicate it right now. That I'm, again, a super de-duper open dude, and like everything I did until this point was AGPL'd, but this is one thing I'm kind of keeping under lock and key. I've also spent a lot of time on this, and you know, until we figure out a sustainable way, until their money comes in to be paying open source contributors and there is a sustainable development, I'm not going to share some of the prompts, except with people who might see that viewpoint, understand the viewpoint, and want to come into the project with me. I do have to say, I worked with about 7 different collaborators on this. They've all seen the prompts. They've all used the prompts. They all have access to all of our private, you know, hidden, super contained source code. But I'm not going to share them right now just because I think it creates more risk than it does benefit. And that's it. Thank you all for joining us. It's been really exciting. Again, I'm happy to share anything. I wanted to say one last thing that before I forget, I wanted to thank, if it showed us on screen, there it is. I want to thank Newspeak House, which is our host here. It got me to London. Decubing, which is my company, which kind of paid my way to London and has sustained me through all their wonderful work, which I hope you check out. And then, of course, my wife, who's been answering your questions, my wife, Grace, who's also in the audience. Huge thanks to her. Without this, I would probably have been burnt out many months ago. So thank you all also who've come, and please reach out to me if you have any questions at all. You can find me, you know, everywhere and anywhere. I don't need to say my email again, but thank you. And I hope to meet you all and see you all in the near future. Thanks again.